It used to be tongue until I had tongue the other day, and ooh, no more.
At 83, most legends slow down. They look back quietly. They let others tell their story. Barbra Streisand does the opposite. She still speaks with clarity, with fire, with memory sharpened by experience. For more than 6 decades, she has refused to fit a mold. She sang the songs no one thought would sell. She played women who were too loud, too smart, too complicated. And when the industry pushed back, she pushed harder. Today, we're stepping inside Streisand's personal film memory. Not a greatest hits list, not what critics crowned, but the movies she herself has spoken about with pride, passion, and sometimes pain. These are films she fought to make, films she protected, films that cost her money, time, and sleep. Some launched her career, some nearly broke her, some allowed her to say what she couldn't say any other way. As we count down from 7 to 1, listen closely to what repeats. Control, identity, courage, and the refusal to be simplified. Here's the question to keep in mind. When an artist chooses a favorite, are they choosing the success or the struggle that shaped them? Let's begin. Number 7, Nuts. Nuts is not an easy film to watch, and that is exactly why it mattered to Barbra Streisand. When she discovered the stage play, she didn't see a courtroom thriller. She saw a woman fighting to define herself in a world determined to silence her. That struggle felt familiar. The character of Claudia Draper is loud, defiant, messy. She refuses to behave in ways that make others comfortable. The system responds by labeling her unstable, dangerous, broken. Streisand understood that impulse immediately. After Deborah Winger exited the project, Streisand stepped in not for prestige, but for ownership. She wanted to protect the character from being simplified. She wanted to control the story being told about a woman who refuses to submit. She didn't just star in the film, she shaped it. Streisand personally assembled the writing team.
Io conosco te meglio di quanto tu conosca me. E lo sai perché? Perché ti ho visto con le brache calate.
Alvin Sargent and Daryl Ponnickson were invited into her home. Over meals at her dining table, the script was rewritten in a matter of days. It was intense, focused, personal. She later described that period as one of the most creatively alive moments of her career. The story struck deeper than fiction. Streisand has spoken openly about growing up in an emotionally difficult household. Her relationship with her stepfather left scars, feelings of being judged, diminished, controlled. Claudia's rage wasn't foreign to her, it was recognizable. That connection fueled the performance. In Nuts, the courtroom becomes a stage where power is exposed. Claudia isn't fighting for innocence, she's fighting for autonomy. The right to tell her own story without being rewritten by men in authority. Even when director Martin Ritt expressed doubts about her suitability for the role, Streisand didn't retreat. She leaned in. She wanted to prove that complexity could be strength. The performance is confrontational, uncomfortable, unpolished. And that was the point. Nuts asks an unsettling question. Who gets to decide when a woman's anger is justified? And when it's called madness? Streisand didn't soften Claudia to make her likable. She let her be difficult. She trusted audiences to sit with that discomfort. The film divided critics, but it accomplished something more important. It forced conversation about agency, about judgment, about how quickly society dismisses women who refuse to behave. For Streisand, Nuts remained significant not because it was successful, but because it was honest. It was a role that demanded exposure instead of control. And sometimes, the films that stay with us aren't the ones that make us feel good. They're the ones that refuse to let us look away. Number 6, The Mirror Has Two Faces. The Mirror Has Two Faces is a romantic comedy that Barbra Streisand treated like a quiet argument. She directed it, she starred in it, and she reshaped its meaning. The story begins with an unusual agreement. Two academics decide to marry without romance. No passion, no expectation of desire, just companionship, safety, predictability. That premise interested Streisand because it questioned something she had watched her entire career. Who decides what is beautiful? In early drafts, the heroine undergoes plastic surgery. The message is clear: change your face, earn love. Streisand rejected that instantly. She insisted the transformation be internal, confidence before appearance, self-worth before approval. That decision defined the film.
The final question is, why do people want to fall in love
when it can have such a short shelf life.
Streisand wanted romance without fantasy, attraction without erasure. She believed comedy could carry serious questions if it respected the audience. As a director, she was deliberate. She framed scenes to observe rather than flatter. She allowed silence. She let awkwardness breathe. The humor grows from recognition, not exaggeration. Her character, Rose Morgan, begins invisible. Smart but overlooked, safe but unchosen. Streisand plays her without apology. No rush to charm, no attempt to soften intelligence. Then something shifts. Not surgery, not youth, not permission. Rose begins to see herself differently. That internal change alters how others respond. The film argues that perception shapes reality, that confidence isn't loud, it's steady. This theme mattered deeply to Streisand. She had spent decades being told what she should fix: her nose, her voice, her presence. She refused. The Mirror Has Two Faces becomes a response to that pressure, a gentle rebuttal delivered through romance. The title itself carries the message: love reflects what we believe about ourselves. If we see inadequacy, we receive distance. If we see value, we invite connection. The film also explores motherhood, expectations passed down, criticism disguised as concern. Streisand allows those scenes to be uncomfortable, honest, familiar. She wasn't interested in easy resolution. Streisand also understood timing. Comedy disarms resistance. Romance invites empathy. By choosing warmth over confrontation, she widened the audience. The message traveled further because it smiled. Viewers laughed, relaxed, and then recognized themselves on screen. That strategy allowed difficult ideas to enter living rooms without shouting, proving that softness can still carry conviction and lasting cultural impact for everyone everywhere. Here's the question the film asked quietly: do we want love, or do we want validation? For Streisand, the answer was clear. Love without self-respect isn't love, it's negotiation. The Mirror Has Two Faces isn't her most famous film, but it is one of her most revealing. It shows what happens when a woman controls the camera and the conversation, not to convince, but to clarify. And sometimes, that's the bravest kind of storytelling. Number 5. A Star is Born. A Star is Born was not just a performance for Barbra Streisand, it was a declaration. By the mid-1970s, Streisand had already proven herself as a star. What she wanted now was control, not dominance. Ownership, the right to shape the story, the sound, and the outcome. This version of A Star is Born gave her that chance. Under her first artist deal, Streisand wasn't simply cast. She was responsible for the concept, the music, and the budget. She carried the risk personally. When costs rose, she waived her acting fee. She invested millions of her own money to protect the vision. Critics questioned her decisions immediately. Why modernize a classic? Why produce it herself? Why involve her boyfriend?
Everywhere you go, fighting breaks out and things get broken. Have you noticed that?
Streisand answered with indifference. When journalists mocked John Peters' background, she famously shrugged and said, "My boyfriend's a hairdresser." The point was clear. Talent isn't defined by permission. The film itself shifts the story's center. This isn't a woman discovering fame through a man. It's a woman whose success forces a man to confront his own collapse. Streisand's Esther Hoffman doesn't shrink. She grows, loudly, publicly. That inversion mattered. Musically, Streisand pushed further. She wanted contemporary sound, rock influence, raw emotion. The result was risky and polarizing, but it worked. The soundtrack dominated charts. The music carried weight instead of nostalgia. Streisand later joked that Peters hadn't even known earlier versions existed. But the humor masked something serious. She wasn't remaking history. She was reclaiming narrative authority. This version of A Star is Born is about visibility, about what happens when a woman refuses to dim herself to preserve someone else's comfort. The tragedy isn't her success, it's his inability to survive it. That truth resonated deeply with Streisand. She had spent her career being told to adjust, to soften, to wait. This film became an answer, a reminder that ambition does not require apology. The production was exhausting, stressful, lonely at times. But Streisand remained committed. She later described the project as an experiment, one that taught her the cost of control and the price of belief. Here's the question the film leaves behind. When power shifts, who is blamed? A Star is Born doesn't resolve that tension, it exposes it. For Streisand, the film stands as proof that creative authority is earned through risk, not consensus. It may not be her most universally loved work, but it is one of her most uncompromising. And sometimes, the films we defend hardest are the ones that reveal us most clearly. Number 4. The Prince of Tides. The Prince of Tides was not chosen lightly by Barbra Streisand, it was chosen carefully. This was a story about memory, about damage carried quietly for years, about how the past waits patiently until someone is ready to face it. When Streisand read Pat Conroy's novel, she recognized its emotional weight immediately. The story wasn't just about romance, it was about healing and the cost of avoiding it. As director, she approached the material with restraint. She didn't rush the emotions. She allowed silence to speak. She trusted the audience to sit with discomfort.
We knew this day would come, didn't we? But you never quite prepared for it.
The film centers on Tom Wingo, a man forced to revisit childhood trauma while helping his sister survive her own. Streisand's character, a psychiatrist, becomes both guide and mirror. Not a savior, a witness. That distinction mattered to her. Streisand has spoken openly about therapy and its role in her own life. She believed healing begins not with answers, but with permission. Permission to remember, permission to feel. The phrase that fascinated her most was the wounded healer. People who dedicate their lives to helping others while quietly avoiding their own pain. She saw that pattern everywhere, in families, in relationships, in herself. During production, real life intervened. Her mother underwent heart surgery while filming was underway. The experience shook Streisand. It reminded her that movies, no matter how important, are secondary to life. That realization deepened her connection to the film's themes. The Prince of Tides became, for her, a story about forgiveness, not approval. Forgiveness doesn't excuse harm, it releases its hold. She framed the film with warmth instead of sentimentality. The southern landscapes feel expansive, but never romanticized. They hold beauty and danger in equal measure, just like memory. The performances follow that tone. No grand speeches, no clean closure. Healing unfolds slowly, imperfectly. Streisand allowed the story to breathe. The film was met with praise and controversy. Some criticized her choices as director. She accepted that. For her, the goal was not consensus, it was honesty. Here's the question the film leaves quietly lingering. What happens when we finally tell the truth about where we came from? The Prince of Tides doesn't promise peace, it offers understanding. And sometimes, that is enough. For Streisand, this film remains deeply personal. Not because it mirrors her life exactly, but because it honors the courage required to look backward without being consumed. It is a film about survival, not through forgetting, but through facing what shaped us. Number 3. Yentl. Yentl was not a career move for Barbra Streisand. It was a calling. She first discovered Isaac Bashevis Singer's short story in the late 1960s. From the beginning, she knew it would be difficult. A woman disguises herself as a man to study religious texts forbidden to her. Studios dismissed it instantly. Too Jewish, too quiet, too risky. Streisand refused to let it go. For 15 years, she fought. Scripts stalled. Financing collapsed. Interest faded. Still, she waited. Because she believed the story wasn't about gender alone. It was about hunger. The hunger to learn, to question, to become more than what the world allows. When Yentl finally moved forward, Streisand took full control. She starred. She directed. She produced. The weight was immense. Every decision rested on her shoulders. The story was personal. Streisand later said that by dressing as a man, she felt she could become her father, a scholar who died young. Through Yentl, she allowed him to live longer, to keep asking questions, to keep reading, to keep dreaming. That emotional connection shaped the film. Yentl does not shout. It thinks, it pauses, it wonders. Streisand uses voiceover not as exposition, but as interior life. We hear Yentl's thoughts because the world refuses to hear her voice. The choice was controversial. Some critics resisted it. Streisand accepted that. She knew silence would have been dishonest. The songs are not decorative, they are confessions. Each one asks the same question in a different way. Why must curiosity be punished? Why must ambition be hidden? Making the film nearly broke her. The pressure was relentless. Crew members doubted her. Executives interfered. She carried responsibility without precedent. Few women had ever directed a studio musical. Fewer still had survived the process. But Streisand persisted. When the film was released, reactions were divided. Some called it indulgent, others called it revolutionary. Streisand focused on what mattered. The story existed, the girl studied, the voice was heard. Yentl won awards. It earned respect. But more importantly, it created space. Here's the question the film leaves behind. What knowledge are we still denied, and who decides? For Streisand, Yentl remains one of her most meaningful works. Not because it was successful, but because it required everything she had. It was a film about refusal. Refusal to accept limits. Refusal to be quiet. Refusal to wait for permission. Yentl doesn't end with certainty. It ends with movement. A journey continuing beyond the frame. And sometimes, that's the most honest ending of all. Number 2, The Way We Were. The Way We Were was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to linger. For Barbra Streisand, this film represented devotion to story over ego. When she first read Arthur Lawrence's script, she didn't see a romance. She saw ideology colliding with intimacy. A woman who refuses to soften her beliefs. A man who survives by avoiding conflict. Katie Morosky mattered to her. Streisand called the script fantastic and felt an immediate connection to Katie's intensity. She admired that the character was political, outspoken, and unapologetic.
Oh, of course you can use my couch.
Morosky, we have...
Will you please? Hubble, there's beer in the ice.
This was not a woman designed to be agreeable. She was designed to be honest. Casting Hubble Gardner became crucial. Streisand believed the story only worked if the man could express restraint without weakness. She pushed for Robert Redford, not just for his looks, but for what he withheld. His stillness, his silence, his ability to suggest thought without explanation. She fought for him. She insisted the studio pay whatever was necessary. She worked closely with director Sidney Pollack to deepen Hubble's interior life. The love story depended on imbalance. Katie burns. Hubble floats. That tension creates the ache. Their chemistry surprised everyone. Redford once observed that Streisand's femininity brought out his masculinity, and her masculinity brought out his femininity. The relationship on screen breathes because it never resolves that duality. The Way We Were understands that love doesn't conquer difference. It coexists with it, sometimes briefly, sometimes painfully. Streisand respected that truth. She resisted tidy endings. She embraced melancholy. The film doesn't punish Katie for her convictions, but it doesn't reward them either. She remains herself. That is the cost. Music became memory. The theme song doesn't celebrate happiness, it mourns it. Streisand's voice carries nostalgia without self-pity. It remembers love as it was, not as it should have been. That restraint defined the film's power. Here's the question it leaves quietly behind. Should love require compromise, or should it survive difference? For Streisand, The Way We Were wasn't about winning the relationship. It was about honoring identity. Katie doesn't bend to keep Hubble. Hubble doesn't harden to deserve Katie. They meet, they love, they part, and that honesty made the film endure. Decades later, Streisand still speaks of it with affection. Not because it was easy, but because it told the truth without apology. Some love stories are meant to last forever. Others are meant to teach us who we are. The Way We Were does both. It remains one of Streisand's most emotionally precise choices, because it accepts loss as meaningful. Not every connection is meant to survive time. Some exist to reveal truth, then fade, leaving memory, music, and the courage to remain oneself afterward in silence now. Number 1, Funny Girl. Funny Girl was not just a debut, it was a battle. When Barbra Streisand was cast as Fanny Brice, the role did not feel guaranteed. The Broadway success didn't translate automatically to Hollywood approval. Studio executives questioned her look, her voice, her fit for the screen.
With an American Beauty nose and 10 American Beauty toes.
Streisand felt that pressure from the beginning, but she refused to surrender the role. She has said many times that Funny Girl remains near and dear to her heart, not because it was easy, but because she had to fight to protect it. Playing Fanny Brice meant defending a woman who was loud, ambitious, unconventional, and unapologetic. Streisand recognized herself in that struggle. Once filming began, she found something unexpected: support. Director William Wyler listened. Cinematographer Harry Stradling encouraged experimentation. Streisand was invited into the creative process rather than pushed aside. That trust mattered. It allowed her instincts to surface. She later wrote that Funny Girl was the best experience she ever had making a film. Not because of fame, because of collaboration. Wyler even gifted her an engraved director's megaphone, joking that she should be directing. It wasn't a joke to Streisand, it was validation, a glimpse of possibility. The performance itself is fearless. Fanny Brice isn't polished. She's funny before she's beautiful, confident before she's accepted. Streisand leaned into that contrast. She didn't soften the character to win affection. She trusted the audience to follow, and they did. Funny Girl announced a new kind of leading woman, one who didn't wait for permission, one who owned her space without apology. Streisand sang with defiance, humor, and vulnerability layered together. The music wasn't decoration, it was declaration. People isn't just a love song, it's a confession. Don't Rain on My Parade isn't bravado, it's refusal. Streisand didn't perform these numbers, she inhabited them. The film changed everything. An Academy Award followed. Stardom arrived overnight. But what stayed with Streisand wasn't recognition. It was the lesson. Fight for the story that feels personal. Protect the voice that sounds like yours. Trust instinct over approval. Here's the question Funny Girl still asks. What happens when a woman refuses to be smaller to be loved? For Streisand, Funny Girl was the answer. It wasn't the start of her career, it was the statement that defined it. And decades later, it remains the film where she first claimed authorship over her own presence. Not because she was allowed to, but because she insisted. Barbra Streisand's favorite films do not tell a story of comfort. They tell a story of conviction. Across these choices, one pattern remains clear. She didn't wait to be chosen. She chose herself. She fought for stories others doubted. She protected characters who were complicated, outspoken, and inconvenient. These films weren't just performances. They were negotiations with power, with identity, with a system that repeatedly asked her to change, soften, or step aside. She didn't. From courtroom defiance to quiet self-worth, from forbidden knowledge to bittersweet love, each film reflects a woman insisting on authorship, not just over her work, over her voice. That's why these movies endure. They don't chase approval, they demand attention. Now the question turns to you. Which of these films resonated most deeply? Was it the courage, the honesty, or the refusal to compromise? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective adds another chapter to these stories. If you enjoyed this journey through Streisand's cinematic legacy, like the video and subscribe for more film histories shaped by the artists who live them. Because great movies don't just entertain, they reveal. And Barbra Streisand has spent a lifetime doing exactly that.